Go back to your slum. That white coat doesn't fool anyone." The shout cut through the Nevada highway air like a blade slicing through the scorching afternoon. Under the fading sunlight, a black woman stood silently beside a silver Tesla. Her hair shifted gently in the desert wind, but her eyes remained calm and unwavering, the eyes of someone long accustomed to danger. Sergeant Blake Dawson, broad-shouldered with dark sunglasses and a crooked grin, stepped forward. "Nice car." "Where'd you steal it from?" beside him. "Officer Trent." Miller adjusted his body camera eyes, gleaming with amusement. She handed over her driver's license, and Dawson glanced at it before tossing it onto the pavement. "Name's Naomi Carter. Where you headed? I just left." "Falcon Ridge, base, stopped only for gas," she replied. Dawson scoffed. "A base, huh? You think I'm stupid?" Naomi didn't respond. Her voice stayed steady as she said, "I suggest you be careful before making a serious mistake." The calm warning made Miller hesitate for a second, but Dawson burst into laughter. "You teaching me the law now?" He jerked his chin. "Step out of the car. Let's check that bag." Naomi didn't move. "I will not comply without lawful cause," she said, her tone composed but firm. Nearby drivers began recording the scene from their cars. Dawson growled into his radio Unit 1 requesting backup. Suspect female black resisting. Naomi exhaled quietly. She had trained countless young officers to avoid this very abuse of power. Yet here she was, its target. The watch on her wrist glinted. With a subtle tap, an Echo 9 signal was transmitted straight to the Pentagon. The watch began a 15-minute countdown. "Do you know what you're doing?" she asked softly. Dawson laughed, stepping closer, his hand resting on his gun. "Yeah, I'm teaching someone a lesson about respect." Naomi met his gaze. "No, you're about to learn that lesson." Her words were quiet, but the air grew heavy. The desert wind swept past, lifting red dust around them. In the distance, a few bystanders kept filming. A hashtag started to spread across phone screens. Shakur Justice on Highway 47. None of them knew that in just a few minutes, a convoy of black SUVs bearing American flags would appear, and the officer smirking now would soon be on his knees apologizing to the woman he called a suspect. Because Naomi Carter, humiliated in the middle of the highway that day, was no ordinary woman. She was a senior Pentagon medical officer, a combat doctor, who had saved hundreds of soldiers on the battlefields of Syria. She remained standing there, her coat fluttering in the wind, her eyes calm and resolute. "Dignity is my armor," she whispered. That quiet phrase, carried away by the desert wind, marked the beginning of the storm of justice about to unfold. That morning, before the Nevada highway turned into a battlefield, the Falcon Ridge Air Base was still quiet under the early Arizona sun. The loudspeakers played the morning anthem. In the officers' quarters, Naomi Carter stood before the mirror, fastening the buttons of her white coat and straightening the row of medals on her uniform. She looked at her reflection, her eyes tired, yet bright. 20 years in military medicine, 4 tours on the front lines, hundreds of emergency operations amid gunfire. She was used to facing danger, but she never knew her greatest test would come not in uniform, but in plain clothes on a highway. Her phone buzzed. The screen showed the name, Eli, my son. Naomi smiled as her 16-year-old's excited voice filled the room. "Mom, I submitted my project, the social tech competition. I called it Echo Justice. Like what you always say, truth must be amplified." Naomi chuckled softly, her tone tender. "That's good, son. But remember, it's not technology that makes justice, it's the person behind it." Eli sighed. "I know, but sometimes it's exhausting." At school, they still call me quota kid, the one who got in just because I'm black. I want to fight back, but then I remember what you said. Stay calm, keep your dignity. Naomi fell silent for a few seconds, her heart tightening. Dignity is your armor, Eli. Don't let them make you forget who you are. He murmured in agreement before hanging up. Naomi put her phone away, slipped on her jacket, and took a deep breath. It seemed like any other day yet something inside her sensed that today that very lesson would be tested on herself. On her desk lay unfinished medical reports for the program Military Ethics in Combat Zones. She gathered the papers, neatly placing them in her bag, along with a classified report she was scheduled to present that afternoon at the University of Reno. That was her favorite part of the job, speaking to students and reminding them that law and ethics still had a place in war. Leaving the base, Naomi drove through rolling red hills. The morning sunlight gilded the desert, glinting off the polished silver body of her car. On the radio, the news spoke of deepening social division, another case of police brutality in the East, another protest left uninvestigated. Naomi turned it off her chest, heavy. After years in the military medical corps, she knew one truth power is only trustworthy when guided by conscience. At the first rest stop, she pulled into a small cafe. The barista, an older woman with silver hair, recognized her and smiled. Haven't seen you in a while, Dr. Carter. No uniform today. Naomi smiled gently. Day off, wanted to feel normal for once. Around here, a black woman being normal rarely goes unnoticed. The words were spoken as a joke, but they landed like a warning. Naomi replied with a faint smile, though her heart sank slightly. As she walked back to her car, she paused by the roadside, looking up at the clear blue sky. A new notification flashed on her phone email from the Department of Defense Priority Echo 9 update. She opened it quickly, scanning the message about the emergency alert system for senior officers, a tool she had helped design, in case of off-duty threat press, and hold for 5 seconds. She smiled, unaware that just hours later she herself would become its first real test. The car rolled on through the arid borderlands, passing scattered checkpoints along the highway. A green road sign appeared. Welcome to Nevada. Naomi turned on soft music, her mind drifting back to the lecture she was preparing. Ethics within power without accountability is corruption. She had repeated that phrase countless times to students, colleagues, and herself. Near noon, a text from Eli appeared. I'll be watching your lecture online. Good luck. Mom Naomi read it and laughed, hearing his voice in her head. She didn't know that the lecture would be replaced by another lesson, one the entire world would witness. The wind grew stronger as she turned onto the main highway. The mountains receded, giving way to silver streaks of sand. Naomi adjusted her rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of a white and blue police cruiser speeding past before circling back behind her. A chill ran down her spine. She glanced at her watch. It was 11:30. She had 3 hours to reach Reno, plenty of time if nothing went wrong. But when the patrol car's red and blue lights flashed and the siren wailed, Naomi knew trouble had found her. She pulled over and lowered her window. On that sunlit stretch of highway, no one yet knew that just hours later, a video recorded right here would flood social media with the headline, Police Humiliate Black Military Doctor and Face the Unexpected. For now, in the calm before the storm, Naomi simply whispered, Today I'll teach them the meaning of true power. That afternoon, the University of Reno gleamed under the golden sun. The American flag fluttered fiercely atop the auditorium as Dr. Naomi Carter stepped onto the stage. No rank, no insignia, only a simple white coat and a calm, steady smile. "I'm not here as an officer," she began, her voice low and firm, "but as a citizen who believes that justice begins with truth." The hall fell silent. At first, students had expected an academic lecture, but her words held them captive. Naomi spoke of surgeries performed on the battlefield, where the line between life and death was measured in breaths. "We were taught to follow orders," she said, "but no one taught us how to keep our humanity under fire. Ethics aren't written in commands, they live in every choice we make." A male student raised his hand. "What if those in power break the law?" Naomi smiled, her gaze both gentle and sharp. "When justice is distorted, responsibility belongs to the one who dares to record and speak out. One video, one honest testimony can change an entire system." A girl wearing a hijab asked softly, "And what if they still don't care, ma'am?" Naomi paused for a few seconds, then answered slowly, "Then you stay calm. You record. You keep your dignity. Dignity is your armor." The room went completely still. Those words would later echo millions of times when she was no longer a guest lecturer, but the center of a national reckoning. The lecture lasted nearly 2 hours. No slides, no theories, only stories drawn from truth. When it ended, the students rose to their feet in applause. Professor Emily Hart shook her hand and said, "You've made all of us reflect on ourselves." Naomi replied softly, "Change always begins with the courage to face what's unjust." Leaving the auditorium, Naomi received a message from Eli. "I watched the live stream. You were amazing. But I heard there are police checkpoints near Highway 47. Drive safe, Mom." Naomi smiled and replied, "I always do." She stopped by a small cafe near the campus gate. The barista recognized her and said, "No uniform today, Dr. Carter." Naomi replied lightly, "Day off, just wanted to see what normal feels like." The woman smiled, though her tone carried sadness. "Around here, normal isn't easy for a black woman." Naomi said nothing. She understood. When she stepped back outside, the sun had softened. Standing by the roadside, she watched the cars drift toward the horizon. A faint unease stirred in her chest, quiet, yet undeniable. She didn't know that within the hour she herself would become living proof of what she had just taught, that truth is a weapon and dignity, the only armor that could save her. It was close to 4 in the afternoon when Naomi left Reno, driving along the highway that cut through the desert. The late sun burned against the distant mountains, reflecting off the glass of her silver Tesla. She played soft music, her mind still echoing with the questions her students had asked. What if those in power don't care about the law? That question kept repeating in her head, sounding like a prophecy. She stopped at a small roadside gas station, its faded sign creaking in the wind. The place sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded only by a few trucks and a tiny convenience store. Naomi stepped out, slid her credit card into the pump, and began fueling. The desert heat shimmered in waves, yet for that brief moment, she felt at peace. A white and blue police car slowly pulled in, its red and blue lights flashing. Naomi frowned slightly. The doors opened and 2 officers stepped out. The taller one, broad-shouldered with cold eyes, was Sergeant Blake Dawson. The younger tanned man following him was Officer Trent Miller. They moved toward her as if approaching a criminal. Dawson stopped in front of her, his tone steady but laced with suspicion. "This, your car?" Naomi turned, keeping her voice calm. "Yes. My name is Naomi Carter. The papers are inside if you'd like to check." Dawson raised an eyebrow. "Someone like you driving a Tesla? That's unusual." The comment sounded casual, but dripped with prejudice. Miller smirked. "Maybe her boyfriend lent it to her." Naomi said nothing. She opened her wallet and handed over the registration and license. Dawson glanced at them, briefly didn't read, then folded and tossed them onto the hood. I need to run further checks. We got reports of a car like this tied to a theft in Henderson. Naomi exhaled softly, holding her composure. You can verify that right now in your system. Everything is valid. Dawson narrowed his eyes. I don't need you telling me how to do my job. The air thickened. The setting sun flashed through the windshield, turning everything harsh and bright. Naomi glanced around. A few drivers had stopped to refuel, now staring toward them. A Latina woman pulled out her phone and whispered, "Oh, God, what's happening before starting a live stream?" Dawson crossed his arms and stepped closer, his tone dripping with disdain. What's your profession? Naomi answered simply. Doctor? Doctor. He let out a short laugh. Probably some cheap clinic. Huh? Miller added, half joking, half serious. Or she's faking it. Scammers are clever these days. Naomi kept her voice, even her eyes unwavering. I have nothing to prove except the truth. If you want verification, I can show professional documentation. But Dawson stepped forward and yanked her bag from her hands. I'll check it myself. Naomi spoke quickly but calmly. You don't have a search warrant and I do not consent. Shut up. I suspect illegal activity. His voice thundered across the gas station, making everyone turn. Miller activated his body camera while Dawson shoved Naomi back against her car. Out of the way, stand still hands visible. Naomi complied without resistance, speaking loudly enough for bystanders to hear. I'm fully cooperating. You have no right to search my bag. The woman streaming gasped. Oh my God, she didn't do anything. In the frame, Dawson glared at the camera, barking, Step back, or you'll be arrested for obstruction. Naomi drew a steady breath. The wind picked up swirling red dust over the pavement. She knew this tactic, the kind of authority disguised as reasonable suspicion. Every muscle in her body tightened, but her voice remained low and steady. You're making a mistake, Sergeant Dawson. He laughed, voice thick with arrogance. A mistake? No, the mistake is yours for thinking your rank or some fake credentials can protect you. For a moment, Naomi saw Eli's face in her mind. She remembered what he'd said that morning. Mom, when people look down on me, I stay silent and prove them wrong with results. She closed her eyes briefly, her fingers brushing against the watch on her wrist. The safety signal wasn't needed yet, but instinct told her the moment was close. Dawson stepped back, scanning the station, raising his voice. Any witnesses here? No one good. Then he pointed at Miller. Search the car. I smell marijuana. Naomi opened her eyes, her voice quiet but sharp as steel. You just lied. The words made Miller freeze. Dawson turned sharply, rage flaring in his eyes. What I said, you lied. And I will not stay silent. The wind stopped. The air grew heavy, thick, like the moment before a storm. In that brief silence, another phone camera clicked on. The hashtag Justice on Highway 47 appeared for the second time. None of them knew that this exact moment, that calm voice and fearless gaze, would ignite a video seen across the world within hours. Naomi stood firm, one hand on the car door, her back straight. Inside, her anger settled into cold focus. She began counting silently in her head. 14 minutes, 13:12. One more step beyond the line, and Echo 9 would activate. When that happened, the game would be over. The tension at the gas station was tight as a wire about to snap. The sunset cast a red glow over the dust, illuminating the cold features of Sergeant Dawson. He ordered Miller search the car. Miller hesitated as he approached the Tesla. Naomi raised her hand, her voice low but firm. You don't have a warrant. I do not consent. Dawson arched an eyebrow and smirked. I smell marijuana. That's probable cause. Naomi looked straight at him, her voice calm and steady. You're lying. I don't smoke and I have nothing illegal. He scoffed and reached to grab the bag from her shoulder. She stepped back, her tone controlled. You're overstepping your authority, Sergeant. Dawson lifted his chin. I know exactly what I'm doing. Miller bent down to search the car. In the trunk, there was only a medical kit and lecture documents. He pulled out a Department of Defense ID card, hesitating. Sarge, this looks real. Dawson snatched it from him and sneered. Fake documents are easy to make. She thinks we're stupid, Naomi answered evenly. You can call to verify. Everything is genuine. Listen here, Dr. Carter, he said, emphasizing her name with mocking scorn. People like you always act self-righteous. But out here, I am the law. Naomi met his eyes, her gaze calm and cold. No, you're just hiding behind it. Rage flared in Dawson's eyes. He pulled out his handcuffs, hands on the hood. Miller hesitated. Sarge, maybe we should... Shut up, Dawson barked, clamping the cuffs around Naomi's wrists, the sharp metallic click echoing through the air. Gasps rippled among the bystanders. The Latina woman live streaming trembled, saying, they're handcuffing her for no reason. Naomi lifted her head and looked straight into the phone camera. I am not resisting. I am cooperating. This is an abuse of power. Her voice carried spreading across the internet in real time. Dawson shoved her against the car, his tone cold. Go ahead, keep talking. That video won't save you. Naomi took a deep breath, then spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Maybe you're right, but it will save someone else. Miller looked at her, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Naomi met his gaze and asked quietly, Do you have children? Officer. He hesitated, then nodded. Then remember this moment. Someday your child could be the one standing where I am. Her words silenced him. Dawson gripped her shoulder, his voice low and threatening. Shut your mouth. You have no idea who you're talking to. Naomi stared back, her calm now terrifying. No, Sergeant. It's you who doesn't know who you're talking to. She glanced at her watch and pressed her fingertip lightly against the glass. Echo 9 activated. A signal was sent straight to the Pentagon. Dawson, still smirking with arrogance, had no idea that within minutes the sky over the distant mountains would blaze with lights, and his career would turn to ashes right here, in the place where he thought his authority ruled. The sun was nearly gone when Naomi stood leaning against the hood of her car, her wrists in handcuffs, eyes fixed on the horizon. The air around the gas station had gone still, broken only by the whistling wind and the dry clink of metal each time Dawson tightened the cuffs. He believed he'd won, while she remained calm, so calm that Miller couldn't understand it. See that Dawson said smugly, People like you always think you're special. Dr. Soldier, whatever. But out here, I'm the one in charge. Naomi didn't answer. She just looked at him, her eyes devoid of anger, but filled with something far more unsettling, absolute calm, as if she knew something he didn't. Miller glanced around and whispered, Sarge, the crowd's coming back. At least 5 people are live streaming. Should we wait for command? Dawson shot him a glare. Command! I'm the command. Now shut up and let me teach her what obedience means. Naomi took a deep breath and said slowly, You can't teach me that because you don't understand where real strength comes from. Dawson laughed loud and twisted. Strength. You're in handcuffs, lady. You got nothing. Naomi's voice was soft, but carried power. Wrong. I have time. and you have less than 10 minutes to make it right." He frowned, irritated. "What?" Naomi only looked at her watch. Dawson stepped closer, his tone sharp. "What the hell did you just say?" "I said," Naomi replied steadily. "Sometimes justice doesn't need weapons, only the patience to wait for the right moment." At that instant, Miller heard a strange sound, a faint, low hum echoing from a distance. He looked up. Tiny points of light were moving quickly along the horizon. Dawson hadn't noticed yet, but Miller's unease began to grow. "What are you pulling here?" Dawson barked. Naomi simply smiled. "You're about to find out." Miller glanced at the phone screen in the hand of the woman filming. The live stream had passed 20,000 viewers. Comments scrolled non-stop. "She's handcuffed. Someone help her. Call the FBI." Dawson grabbed his radio, shouting, "This is Unit 47 requesting backup. Suspect resisting situation escalating." The voice from the other end crackled. "Unit 47. Hold your position. Federal alert issued. Await further orders." Dawson scowled. "Federal alert? I didn't call for that." Naomi remained silent. Seconds later, the roar of engines rolled across the desert. Black SUVs emerged from the bend headlights cutting through the dusk. Their doors opened in unison as men in black suits stepped out, not police, but federal agents. Each stride they took sent red dust swirling around their feet. Miller backed away, stunned. "Sarge, those are Pentagon vehicles." Dawson turned pale. "Don't mess with me, that's impossible." One of the agents stepped forward, voice firm and deep. "Sergeant Blake Dawson." Dawson hesitated. "Yes, what is this about?" The agent presented his credentials. "Defense Investigation Bureau. You are ordered to remove your hands from the detainee immediately." "What?" "She's my suspect." "I was." The agent cut him off, his tone like ice. "You are detaining the wrong person. This woman is Commander Naomi Carter, Senior Medical Officer, Department of Defense. You have assaulted a federal officer." The words froze the entire gas station. Dawson stared, his lips trembling. She's what?" Naomi looked at him, her voice calm and merciless. "I told you, you were making a mistake." Miller swallowed hard, lowering his hands. The onlookers gasped. "Oh my God, she's really an officer." The live stream exploded with comments. "He's done for. Justice came fast." The agents approached and unlocked Naomi's cuffs. "Commander Carter, our apologies for the delay. Echo 9 is fully activated." She nodded slightly. "You arrived just in time." Then she turned to Dawson, her tone low and sharp as a blade. "Sergeant, you said you were in charge? Now you know who really is." He stood frozen, his lips trembling, the flashing lights painting his face in shades of red and blue. Naomi looked to Miller, her voice softer. "You still have a choice. Do the right thing right now." He bowed his head, voice breaking. I'm sorry, Commander." Naomi nodded, then faced the still recording camera, her words clear and unwavering. "No one stands above the law, not the police, not the military, only the truth." Her statement cracked across the desert like thunder. 15 minutes had passed. And there, in the very place Dawson thought his authority reigned, his power collapsed not through violence, but because one woman stayed calm and believed in the strength of dignity. The engines of the black SUVs roared across the highway, stirring up red dust that rose like mist. Naomi stood in the glare of headlights, the marks of handcuffs still visible on her wrists, but her face was calm, almost cold. A federal agent approached and handed her a satellite phone. The deep voice of her commanding officer came through the speaker. "Commander Carter Echo 9 signal confirmed. Is the situation under control? Naomi kept her eyes locked on Dawson as she replied clearly. It's under control, sir. 2 local officers overstepped their authority and assaulted a federal officer. I need this case transferred to the Department of Justice immediately. Ending the call, she turned toward Dawson. He stood frozen, his face pale. Wait, I didn't know who you were, he stammered. Naomi's tone remained steady. That's exactly why you dared to do this. You think power gives you the right to humiliate others, but in truth, it only reveals who you really are. Miller looked around nervously and muttered, Sarge, something's wrong. The crowd's coming back, and I think those men are real agents. Dawson spun around and saw the line of figures in black suits approaching their badges glinting under the headlights. One of them called out, Sergeant Blake Dawson, drop your weapon and step back immediately. Dawson hesitated. She's my suspect, the agent replied firmly. No. You are detaining the wrong person. This is Commander Naomi Carter, Senior Medical Officer, United States Department of Defense. The world seemed to stop. Dawson staggered back, his mouth dry. Naomi pulled an ID card from her pocket and held it up. You can verify this directly. I am Commander Carter, Department of Defense, and you just committed a felony against a federal officer. The agent moved forward and removed her cuffs. Our apologies, Commander. Echo 9 was delayed by 2 minutes due to signal interference. Naomi nodded, her gaze still fixed on Dawson. That's all right. I want him to hear what I have to say. She stepped closer, her voice even and sharp. You said you were the one in control. Now you know who really is. Miller bowed his head, voice trembling. Commander, I'm sorry. I knew this was wrong, but didn't have the courage to speak. Naomi looked at him and nodded slightly. You still have a chance to make it right. Silence can be a form of complicity. He swallowed hard and whispered, I understand. Dawson looked around desperately for an escape. I was just doing my job. You don't understand the pressure we're under? Naomi cut him off. Pressure is no excuse for trampling on others. You swore to protect people, not to intimidate them. A true officer doesn't fear the light. Only the guilty do. The lead agent gestured to his team. Record everything! The camera lights turned on, shining directly on Dawson. He trembled, trying to stand upright, but his knees began to buckle. Naomi's phone rang again. The voice of General Malcolm Pierce echoed through the speaker. Naomi, I'm watching live. The Department of Justice has been notified. Are you all right? Naomi replied. Yes, sir. The situation is under control. Both suspects are in custody. Good, the general said, his tone softening. I want a full report, including the field footage. And Naomi... His voice dropped lower. You did the right thing. When the call ended, Naomi looked around the gas station, once the scene of humiliation, now a gathering place of justice. The agents packed up their equipment, bystanders stood back, eyes still fixed on their phones. The live stream had surpassed 500,000 viewers. Naomi turned toward one of the cameras, her voice clear and resolute. I am Commander Naomi Carter, United States Department of Defense. I confirm that every citizen, regardless of color or status, deserves respect. And today, justice begins here. Behind her, Dawson fell to his knees, the flashing lights reflecting off his pale face. Miller stood motionless, unable to look. In the heavy silence, Naomi turned and walked toward the line of federal vehicles. She knew this moment was more than just the downfall of an arrogant man. It was a reminder that dignity, when defended to the end, is stronger than any weapon. The flashing lights of the black SUVs reflected off the pavement, mixing with the crimson hue of the sunset. Naomi stepped forward slowly, her voice low and steady, commanding everyone's attention. "Sergeant Dawson, she said you are under investigation for assaulting a federal officer, obstructing duty, and violating civil rights." Dawson stepped back, his face pale, his hand gripping the holster of his gun as if clinging to the last shred of power he had left. "You can't do this. I didn't know who you were." Naomi looked at him, her gaze cold but tinged with faint pity. "No, you did know. You knew I was someone you couldn't control, and that's what really scared you." A federal agent stepped forward, his tone firm. "Sergeant Dawson, surrender your weapon and badge immediately." Dawson stood frozen. Miller spoke softly. "Sarge, just do it." He didn't move. His eyes darted toward the crowd. Dozens of phones were still recording. His voice trembled. "You don't understand. They'll treat me like a criminal." Naomi stepped closer, her voice calm and clear. "Because today, you are one." Dawson hissed through his teeth. "I was just doing my job." Naomi replied, "No, you were doing what you thought you could get away with, because you believed no one would stop you. But today, you met the wrong person." His eyes flickered from anger to panic. Another agent stepped up and retrieved Miller's body cam footage. Every word, every act of humiliation appeared crystal clear on the screen. Dawson staggered like a man drowning. No, I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to cooperate." Naomi tilted her head. "You wanted me to cooperate while you broke every rule." She turned to Miller. "Officer Miller, disarm him and document this entire process for the report." Miller nodded slowly and moved forward. Dawson backed away, his voice shaking. "You're turning on me." Miller met his gaze, his eyes no longer afraid but resolute. "No, Sarge. I'm just done staying silent." Miller removed Dawson's gun, then took his badge. The metallic clatter of it hitting the car hood echoed coldly. Naomi gestured to the agents. "Secure both items on my vehicle. They're now evidence." Dawson stood trembling, his shoulders shaking. You're destroying my life." Naomi answered evenly. "No, you did that yourself. I'm just letting the light in." One of the agents received a call, then turned to report, "Commander, the FBI director wants to confirm the case. Both the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice are watching." Naomi nodded. "Patch him through." The distinctive voice of Director Lewis Harding came through the speaker. "Commander Carter, this is Harding. We've been monitoring everything from the Echo 9 feed. Sergeant Dawson will be taken into federal custody immediately. Do you have any special requests?" Naomi looked around, her tone deep and unwavering. "Just one, sir. Don't let this video be buried. People have the right to see the truth." "Confirmed," Harding replied. "The full recording will be made public once the preliminary investigation is complete." Naomi nodded, slightly, turning toward the gathered crowd. "Thank you all for being here. Keep your recordings. Do not delete them. Justice needs witnesses, and today you are those witnesses." The crowd murmured in agreement, some applauding. A middle-aged woman stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. Finally, someone spoke for us." Naomi smiled gently and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It wasn't me. It was all of us." Dawson sank to the curb, his head bowed, sweat and dust streaking his face. Miller stood motionless, his expression a mix of shame and relief. Naomi said to him, "You made the right choice. Remember this feeling, the feeling of standing on the right side. Don't ever forget it. A federal agent bound Dawson's hands and read him his rights. The radio crackled. All units confirmed target is in custody. Naomi turned toward a phone, still live streaming. Her voice rang out clear and powerful, not loud, but commanding. No one has the right to abuse power to humiliate others. The law exists to protect, not to threaten. If you see something wrong, record it. Speak out. Because justice only lives when someone dares to stand up for it. Her words brought silence over the gas station. Only the sound of desert wind brushed past the lamp posts. On the horizon, the sun had vanished, leaving behind the faint glow of the first night after a long day, the day when a man who once believed himself untouchable was forced to kneel before the truth. Naomi looked up at the darkening sky and spoke softly, almost to herself. Justice doesn't come from handcuffs, but from knowing when to stop. You didn't stop, Dawson. And now the world will learn from your mistake. 3 days after the incident, the Nevada desert returned to silence. But online, the storm raged on. The video showing Sergeant Dawson kneeling under flashing lights, while Commander Naomi Carter raised her Department of Defense ID, had spread across the world. Within 48 hours, it reached over 4 million views, tens of millions of comments, and the hashtags #Echo9 and Justice for All appeared on every platform. Morning news opened with Naomi's image, her calm face and steady gaze becoming a new symbol of justice and courage. In Washington, D.C., FBI Director Louis Harding held an emergency press conference. Beside him sat Naomi in full uniform, her medals glinting under the glare of cameras. Harding spoke clearly. The special investigation, codenamed Echo 9. Investigation is now officially underway. Its goal to pursue all cases of abuse of authority within local law enforcement. He looked at Naomi, his tone grave. If not for Commander Carter's composure, this incident would have ended in blood. Naomi sat quietly. When a reporter asked, "What do you think made this video resonate so powerfully?" she replied softly, her voice carrying far. Because people realize that justice isn't a slogan, it's a choice. And I simply chose to stand on the right side. Meanwhile, in Chicago, her son Eli sat in his classroom, the light from his computer screen glowing on his face. The website he once built just for a competition had now become real echojustice.org. Citizens could upload videos, photos, and evidence of abuse directly to federal investigators. In less than a day, more than 20,000 people had joined. Eli opened the comments section and read messages of gratitude, including one that said I was stopped unfairly once. Now I know I have a place to speak out. Eli turned to his classmate. My mom always said if justice doesn't protect us, we have to teach it how to. He grinned with pride. At the same time, Naomi returned to her office at the Department of Defense. Her desk was covered in letters and emails from across the country, thank you notes, encouragement, and heartbreaking stories. One handwritten letter made her stop. My son was wrongfully arrested. No one believed me. Thank you for making us believe in the law again. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. Her eyes lingered on the final line. Dignity is armor. That afternoon, Naomi attended a meeting at the Department of Justice. The conference room glowed with the light from digital screens, displaying the names of 28 police officers across 3 states under investigation for similar misconduct. The Attorney General spoke firmly. We are not just addressing individuals. We must reform the system that allows them to exist. Naomi responded. No system fails because of a few bad people. It fails when good people choose silence. The room fell silent. The media quickly quoted her words, and by evening the phrase appeared across television screens and social media feeds. It breaks when good people stay silent. That night at the small cafe in Nevada where it all happened, locals hung a wooden sign engraved with the words, "Here justice found its voice." Late that night, Naomi sat in her D.C. apartment, the city lights reflecting off the glass window. She replayed the gas station video, watching herself standing between two drawn guns, her face composed, her voice unwavering. She smiled faintly. Her phone rang. Eli's joyful voice filled the room. "Mom, my site just hit 1 million views. I want to expand it into a national reporting network." Naomi leaned back in her chair and said softly, "Do it, Eli. Don't let justice stop at one video. Make it a habit for people." When the call ended, she looked out the window. The city shone bright, but in her mind she saw that lonely gas station in the desert where one simple sentence had made a nation reflect, "Dignity is armor." From that day forward, Echo 9 was no longer just an emergency signal. It became a national movement, a reminder that the light of justice doesn't come from authority, but from those who dare to stand in the darkness. 1 month after the incident, the federal court in Washington, D.C. opened the first trial of the Echo 9 investigation. Reporters crowded the hallways. Hundreds of citizens, students, veterans, and human rights advocates lined up waiting to enter the courtroom. On the defendant's bench, Sergeant Blake Dawson sat rigid, his face gaunt, eyes sunken, like a man haunted by a nightmare that refused to end. Naomi entered the courtroom in full uniform, her medals gleaming under the lights. The entire room stood. She did not look at the defendant, but quietly made her way to the witness stand, nodding to Prosecutor Marcus Reed, a black attorney who had grown up in the slums of Atlanta, seeing this case as his chance to prove that the law is not colorblind. Reed began. "Your Honor, what we are witnessing is the consequence of power left unchecked. The defendant, Sergeant Dawson, abused his authority, fabricated evidence, and assaulted a federal officer. But more importantly, his actions represent a disease that has long infected this system." Dawson's lawyer tried to argue, "My client did not know Ms. Carter was a federal officer. He reacted under stress." Reed's reply was sharp as a hammer strike. "Stress is not an excuse for humiliation, threats, or false accusations. If that is how officers are trained to respond, then we must redefine what it means to protect and serve." Naomi was called to testify. She took a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the stand. "I am not here for revenge," she said evenly. "I am here for the thousands who never got the chance to speak. Those without badges, without power, and without cameras to prove their innocence." She recounted every detail, how Dawson stopped her, how he lied, handcuffed her, and treated her with contempt. Each word she spoke cut through the protective shell that had shielded him for years. Reporters scribbled furiously, eyes fixed on her. Reed presented the evidence, the live stream video, the body camera footage, the audio from Dawson's radio call, in which he falsely claimed the suspect was resisting. When the recording played, the courtroom fell silent. Dawson's head bowed, his hands gripping the table. "We also have a special witness," Reed said, "Officer Trent Miller." The doors opened and Miller entered. His young face carried the weight of guilt. Standing before the court, his hands trembled. "I was wrong not to stop him. I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of being seen as a traitor. But staying silent made me part of it. And I don't want my child to grow up thinking silence is right." His words made Naomi look at him with quiet gratitude. This was what she had hoped for, not just punishment, but awakening. In his closing argument, Reed said, "We cannot rebuild trust with apologies. Trust returns only through accountability." He pointed toward Dawson. This man did not just insult a woman. He insulted the very meaning of the badge he wore. When the jury returned, no one was surprised by the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Dawson's head dropped, his lips trembling. The court sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison for assaulting an officer, violating civil rights, and filing false reports. The media erupted. The next morning, every headline carried the same words: "Police officer convicted in Echo 9 case justice, wears the face of a black woman." But for Naomi, the victory brought no joy. That night in her quiet office at the Department of Defense, she opened the verdict on her screen and read the words again and again: United States versus Blake Dawson. She knew this was not the end of a case, but the beginning of something larger. Her phone rang and Eli's voice came through, excited. "Mom? I saw the verdict. They're calling you a hero." Naomi smiled softly. "A hero? No. I just did what had to be done. Justice doesn't need heroes, Eli. It needs people who refuse to stay silent." On the other end, Eli replied quietly, "Then I won't stay silent." Naomi lifted her gaze toward the window, the city lights flickering in shades of blue and red like countless eyes watching her. "Good," she whispered, "because this fight is just beginning." Outside the courthouse, hundreds of people gathered holding signs that read, "Echo 9, we see you." Among them, an elderly woman wept softly, murmuring, "Justice has come at last." Naomi watched the scene unfold on the live broadcast. She didn't smile, she only nodded slightly. Inside her was no triumph, only the quiet understanding of someone who knew that when justice is finally illuminated, the real work has just begun. 1 year after the trial, America had changed. From the case of United States versus Blake Dawson, Congress passed the Echo 9 Reform Act, mandating that every police complaint be investigated independently. Hundreds of buried cases were reopened, and thousands of voices were finally heard. Naomi Carter, now the Deputy Surgeon General, led a nationwide reform program for transparency in law enforcement. She traveled across states, speaking with officers, students, and citizens. Everywhere she went, people called her the woman who gave justice its voice. But she only smiled and said, "I'm not a hero. I just chose not to bow my head." In Chicago, her son Eli, now a freshman studying data science, launched a new version of echojustice.org. "We've added an anonymous security system," Eli told hundreds of students. "No one should ever have to fear telling the truth again." Naomi sat in the front row, eyes glistening. In her son, she saw a generation that believed light not only reveals the truth, but also shows the way. That evening, mother and son sat together by Lake Michigan. Eli said softly, "If it hadn't been for that day at the gas station, I don't think I'd believe one person could make a difference." Naomi smiled gently. "It wasn't just one person, son. It was everyone who stood with me that day. In the first year of the Echo 9 Act's implementation, police complaint rates dropped by more than 50%, not because people were afraid, but because officers understood that every action was being watched." Naomi addressed Congress saying, "Justice is not measured by the number of arrests, but by reminding those in power who they serve. I was once a victim of the system, and I chose to fix it instead of seeking revenge." The next morning, newspapers carried the headline, "Deputy Surgeon General Carter Justice is Responsibility." In Nevada, the old gas station had been transformed into the Echo Center for Justice. On its outer wall, her words were engraved, "Dignity is armor." Locals visited daily, leaving flowers and telling their children the story of the woman who changed a nation through calm and conviction. At the end of the year, Naomi returned there. The desert wind still blew as it always had. She read the weathered wooden sign, "Here justice found its voice." She whispered, "And now it has a whole generation to carry it forward." On her way home, her phone buzzed a message from Eli. "Tomorrow, I'll be speaking on the topic. When silence breaks, systems change." Naomi looked out at the lavender dusk and smiled. She knew justice never dies. It only needs people who continue to believe in the light. 1 year after the Echo 9 Reform Act was passed, America had truly transformed. That evening, Lincoln Hall in Washington, D.C. was packed for a powerful event titled Justice in the Light. On stage, Deputy Surgeon General Naomi Carter stepped forward in her deep blue uniform, the silver of her medals gleaming beneath the lights as applause thundered around her. "Thank you," she began, her voice calm and resonant. "A year ago, I was a woman in handcuffs on the side of a highway. Today, I stand here not to revisit fear, but to speak about the strength of those who refuse to stay silent." Behind her, the screen lit up with numbers: over 50% of police complaints now reviewed publicly, 12 states enacting independent oversight laws, nearly 200 officers prosecuted for abuse of power. These numbers, she said, prove that when people speak, the system must listen. The crowd grew still as her voice deepened. Justice isn't for the powerful. It lives in those who dare to keep their dignity even when the world tries to strip it away. I'm no hero. I simply chose not to bow. In the front row sat Eli, surrounded by young engineers operating Echo Justice 2.0, a platform using artificial intelligence to monitor state authority. When their eyes met, Naomi smiled softly. A student raised a hand and asked, "Commander, if that day you hadn't been a federal officer, what would have happened?" Naomi paused, then answered, "I would probably be just another forgotten case. That's why I couldn't stay silent. I survived not because of luck, but because truth deserves protection at any cost." The hall erupted in applause. Naomi placed a hand on her chest and added, "Dignity cannot be taken away unless we give it up. And when we hold on to it, power must bow." Later that night, Naomi and Eli returned to Nevada. The old gas station where everything began was now the Echo Center for Justice. On the outer wall hung a photo of Naomi standing amid flashing red and blue lights, the words engraved below, "Dignity is my armor." Locals gathered with candles and flowers, telling their children the story of the woman who made a nation listen. Eli whispered, "Mom, you've started a new era." Naomi gazed at the hundreds of flickering lights and shook her head. "No, Eli. I just lit a candle. Keeping it burning, that's your generation's task." She stepped up onto the wooden stage, her voice carrying through the cool desert air. "If you've ever thought you were too small to make a difference, remember ordinary people once made an entire system kneel. If you see injustice, don't turn away. Record it, speak out, stand tall." A wave of applause rippled through the night, and chants of justice for all echoed under the stars. The candlelight danced across Naomi's face, calm, resolute, radiant against the dark. Before stepping down, she turned back to the crowd and said softly, "If you believe light can conquer darkness, share this story. Because justice lives only as long as we dare to believe. And that voice can begin with you." As the soft glow of candles illuminated her face, Naomi Carter was no longer just the woman who changed a system. She had become a symbol of what the world must never forget, that dignity fiercely guarded is humanity's most powerful weapon.